All right, welcome back. So this video is going to be a good one. We have a big task in front of us. We've got to distribute the video in the room. We've got our laptops, we've got that wireless display. We want to be able to send any of these HDMI signals to either of the screens in the room. And more importantly, we want that to be automated. We want the room to react so that someone plugs in a laptop, it automatically routes that laptop to the display. That is the goal, a seamless, intuitive room, right? That's what we're gonna learn to do with the block controller. So first things first is let's do a quick reminder of what is happening in our room. We're using the NV32H for this particular room. A reminder of what this box does. I know these videos are gonna live for a while and you never know, we might have even cooler stuff in the future, but for now, this box is perfect for us because it can operate as the core as well as the local video switcher. So this has got 3 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI outputs. It's got the USB-B port that allows us to connect our USB video and audio streaming capabilities to the PC or the laptop in the room. It's got PoE++, so all the power is right there on the cable. You don't need to run an external power cable if you don't have to. It's fantastic. And of course, it's doing the work of a core as well. A reminder for this particular box, like I said, it generally speaking can operate as a core or as an encoder or a decoder. So if you had HDMI that you needed to run over long areas across the network in your system, then this box could either encode its HDMI streams and send it to another box, or it could be that other box that decodes it off of the network, or it can be a core and you use those HDMI inputs and outputs just locally. Now, you could also engage the streaming license on the NV32H so that it could be a core and an encoder, or a core and a decoder, but in our case, it's just a small room. It's small enough that those HDMI connections are pretty close, so we can just count on the cables. We're just going to use it as a core and send the local inputs and outputs out. The topography looks a little bit like this. Again, our core is in the room. We got laptop 1, laptop 2, our wireless presentation. We have the USB cable connecting to whichever laptop someone is using. It's all coming in via HDMI and going out via HDMI. Pretty simple. We got some new concepts for you this time around. Here's what we're going to be learning about. We're going to be using the .choices block, which will allow us to apply multiple options to a box that requires many things to be chosen from. We're going to be using the find in arrays block, which lets us search for a particular item within an array and then pull out the information of which mailbox we found it in. We're going to be doing something new with functions called return functions, a special type of function that does its task and then provides you with some information as it's completed. And we're also going to collapse some blocks. Nothing terribly special there, but we haven't shown it to you yet, so let's show it to you now. Here is our list of tasks we want to accomplish. We are going to add a new block controller. We're going to add a combo box or a list box to our UCI to provide us the source selection for the left display and the right display. We're going to control the NV32H from that combo or the list box. And we also want to provide real feedback from the device to update our UCI as well. We don't just want to rely on pressing the button on the UCI to change the NV32. We want to know that when the NV32 changes, that talks back to us as well, because there's probably other things in the room that might end up changing the video routing. We want to always make sure our UCI is in sync with the actual device. Okay. So let's do all that. We're going to start by going back to our design, go to the video routing controls section we've built out for you here. We're adding a new block controller in this video routing control section. I'm going to name it. I'm going to call this my video routing block controller. Once again, I'm giving myself that nice long name so I can see my control pins if necessary. Let's take a look at its control panel and add some controls here. What do we need to add? Well, we're going to add a first control. This is going to be the list box that we choose from. Let's change the category type to text. And this can be a text box, a combo box, or a list box. The difference between a combo box and a list box are negligible when it comes to the code. This is purely a cosmetic difference for your UCI. A combo box gives you a single visual field, and then when you click on it, it drops down and it provides you a menu of things you can choose from, and then it collapses again. Whereas a list box is a permanent field that is wide that you can scroll through and you can pick the one that you want, but you can still see the other options.
Combo box usually comes with the drinks too.
Yeah, chips and a drink. The combo box comes with chips and a drink. The list box is a la carte. So whichever one you pick, doesn't matter to me. I'm gonna go with list box just because we haven't used it before. The combo box we used in the earlier version of the class when we were using the selector. So I'm gonna use a list box just to be different. Let's name this display 1 select. And we'll add another one that will be called display 2 select. And that one will also be a list box. Next up, just to anticipate the needs of something we're going to do later on, let's add a couple of more controls. I want you to add 2 more controls. These ones will be LEDs that will receive the information of whether or not a laptop is connected. We used those earlier to turn on the displays. We're going to use those exact same signals to give some information here to this block controller to route the displays. So almost the exact same thing we did earlier. I'm going to call this my laptop active 1, and that is going to be an indicator, which is an LED with an input pin. We want to be able to bring information in. And same thing with the second one. This will be laptop active 2, also an indicator, also an LED, also with an input pin. And in fact, you can wrap up those input pins right now if you click on that control pin. We used these earlier. We want the laptop 1 active from emulator and laptop 2 active from emulator. That way we're just getting that information. Same place we sent it previously to our display block controller is now being sent over here to our video routing block controller. Okay, so you may be wondering, Patrick, are you wondering?
Yes.
Why are we bothering to create this field that will control the routing for the NV32H? Don't we already have a way of controlling the routing of the NV32H?
It seems senseless, Nate.
Yeah, of course we do. Of course we can already control it. If you go up to the NV32H and you open it up, yeah, you got all these routing buttons right here. Why don't you just grab those, Patrick? Why are you wasting my time?
Variety is the spice of life.
So if you're doing a small number of sources, like you've only got 2 or 3, honestly, I would just grab these. I would just grab the HDMI 1 button and the HDMI 2 button and the graphic button or whatever, and I would put those on the UCI, and I would rename them, of course, because HDMI 1 probably doesn't mean anything to the user. But that's perfect. We've got those already. But what if you have more than 2 or 3 options? If you've got a handful more than that, it's going to start to really weigh down the UCI with all these different buttons. Like you got 10 buttons on there just so you can pick one of them. That's an ugly UCI because it's most of the page just dedicated to one little source selection, right? Now you could give your user, let me jump into emulation mode really quickly. You could give your user the drop-down menus that are built inherently inside this control panel. They exist. I've got one here where I can say, hey, which one do I want? Graphic 1, 2, or 3? HDMI 1, 2, or 3? But the problem is that that particular field on UCI, you can't customize. It will only give those options in that order. And like I just said, HDMI 1 doesn't mean anything to the user. Graphic 1, 2, 3, that doesn't mean anything. Not to mention that it's giving it to them in an order that probably isn't the most intuitive. I want to give them an order in which the thing they probably want the most often is on the top, and the thing they want the least often is on the bottom. And right now, the graphics are probably the least important option because those are going to be just like a logo for the room, but they're the first thing on the list. So this list is not a good list for the user because it's just the wrong order and it's the wrong labels. It's fine for an engineer. That's why it's here in the control panel, but we want something a little bit more custom for our UCI. That's why we're building our own list box, and our list box will then control this field right here. So this control is called output 1 select by name. Let's remember that. We are going to be controlling this exact control from our script using our list boxes. That also means that we can control which options they have, right? If there wasn't anything on HDMI 3 here, or there wasn't a graphic 2 or a graphic 3, we wouldn't be able to remove them from this list. So using our own list boxes really lets us customize their experience. Okay, so let's go back down here. We will jump out of emulation mode, and we will grab these 2 fields, display 1 and display 2, and let's just put them on our UCI. So I'm just going to pull them both out here. And go back to your class UCI, I'm going to cut those and place them. Where are we going to place them? We're placing them on the displays layer. Now they may come in a little odd looking. That's just because we don't have any text in them yet, but once we fill these with information, we'll be able to see that. So I'm going to make mine a little bit like this. It'll make more sense to size them once you have some information in there, but for now, I'm going to grab a text block. I'm just going to say this is the left display and the right display. And I'll probably, just center these above each other. Take a little bit of time to make sure they look good. Take a second to make yours look good as well. So how do we fill this block with information? Let's jump into our script. And normally, when you've got a text field, it has a string. And that string is the textual description of what it currently is set to. Now, in this case, we actually need multiple strings. And we need to be able to choose from which of those strings the one is currently selected. We're going to do that with an array. We used an array earlier for our lighting options, right? We're going to create an array, which is basically a list of different options for this particular control. So you may remember we created an array earlier by creating a variable first. So we create a variable, and then inside that we create an array with, right? In this case, we're going to have the laptop 1, laptop 2, the wireless, and then let's throw in the logo in the room as a fourth option, just so that if we want to, we can always toggle to that. So I'll use my icon to add a fourth item. And because these are labels, we're just going to use some strings to fill them in. So let's grab 4 strings to create our array. Now, what's a good name for this array? This array should always be described in something that makes sense to us. I'm going to call this an array of friendly names. Why friendly names? Well, keep in mind that all of these sources have an actual name. Like the actual name is HDMI1, HDMI2, Graphic 1, etc. But those are the names we don't want. Those are unfriendly names as far as I'm concerned. So this is a list of friendly names, names that make sense to a user. Maybe it's something like Laptop 1 and Laptop 2. Maybe even that's not good enough. You might find that in the room they want something more descriptive. They want like red cable and blue cable, because they're not sure which cable is which, right? But a color really helps them figure that out. Whatever it is, you're going to put your labels in here. And this, we've created our array of options. Now we need to apply that array to the list box. So we're going to go to our controls, find that display 1 select. And previously you may have said I want to set this control string to something. That's not what we're doing. We're going to set the control's choices to something. This .choices aspect of a control allows it to look at an array and have those be all the options of what it might be. So I'm going to grab set control, display 1 select choices to, and then which one? The array of friendly names, the one that we just made. That's fine. I'll leave that as a ghost block because that's the right answer. Now we've done that for the left display. Let's just duplicate this for the right display. And that way, both of them will populate with these 4 options as their names. Now, I will say this. The order that you do this does matter. I talked previously about how different blocks that are just kind of free-floating in your design will generally resolve top to bottom. But sometimes, Lua does what it wants to do, and it might put them in a different order. If for some reason I put these above my array, in fact, I'll even snap them to each other, this would not work. Because as the code compiles, first thing it's going to do is try to set the choices to this array, but there's nothing in that array. That array doesn't even exist yet. It doesn't exist until it gets to the 3rd line of code, right? So you definitely want to make sure when you do something like this to snap your blocks together to ensure that they do resolve in the proper order. In this case, we create the array first with these names, then we apply that array of names to our first and our second displays. Once we run this code and we jump back to our UCI and we go into emulation mode because we actually want to see it work, you'll see, hey, look at that, there they are. There's my names. They showed up exactly where I want them to. So if you want to pause and adjust the visual appearance of this, these controls now, feel free to do so. That way you can proceed with something that looks good to you. I actually think this looks pretty good the way it is. One thing I want to point out before we move on is what actually happens when you engage this control now. because we set the choices to this array, but that doesn't mean that its .string aspect is assigned yet. When you click on the control, it then changes the string aspect of that control to this new name. So the new string is laptop1. And the act of doing that causes the event handler to occur. If I click on logo, now its string is logo, and an event handler has occurred. If I click on logo again, yes, I've clicked on it again, but the string has not changed, so an event handler has not gone off. Be aware of that. Just because I have interacted with this control doesn't mean the event handler will go because there was no events. The string didn't change. It will only cause the event handler to trigger if the string does change. Probably not a big deal. You're probably not going to be in a circumstance where you need the event handler to go if someone re-hits the same button. But just under the hood, it's worth knowing that that's sort of how the event handler works in these combo boxes. Okay, so you've got the controls there. Let's take a pause. Our UCI is looking pretty good. We'll come back and we will start to make this block work.